All right, everybody, welcome back. So this is going to be Excel 2-1. So we're going to start with the more advanced topics. And in this case, I'm going to start the easiest of the advanced topics, in my opinion, is pivot tables. So what we'll do, a pivot table in a technical sense is a way of looking at data in multiple dimensions, which might be a little too complex to think of it that way if you're new to it. But really what we're doing is we're just going to do almost exactly like we've done before. Where we have our multiple dimensions are names and years. Those are two different dimensions. And then we have the data that fills in. It's possible to analyze data in more than two dimensions. We could have name, year, and then under that we could have months, or we could have names and regions and years, and that would be three different dimensions. So we could do multiple things. The way we're going to do that is by selecting our data. And so I'll just click in our table, I'll hit Control A to highlight all of that information. And I'll go up to Insert and I'll click Pivot Table, which is the very far left choice. Now it's going to ask me where and what I want to do with this pivot table. So I already selected table 1, so perfect, I can leave that alone. Yours might say A1 through G44 or something, that's fine. It's the same information. And where do I want to put it? I'm going to put it in New Worksheet because this is already getting too cluttered to have it in the same sheet. So I'm just going to add it into a new one. I'm going to hit OK. And you'll see sheet 4 was created. You'll remember from previous episodes that we already used up sheet 3. So sheet 4 is created with a pivot table on it. I'm going to go ahead and move my little camera thing out of the way. So if I were to click somewhere else, somewhere away from my pivot table, this little box right here is going to be my pivot table. Currently it's blank. It just says click in this area to work. If I click somewhere else, I lose the menu option. But if I click inside my pivot table, then my menu comes back, and this allows me to choose what I want to do. So in this case, if I scroll down and look, there's all of my headers are here: order date, the year, the region, the rep, the total sales, all that kind of stuff. And then down here is what I can do with them. I can put those items into rows, I can put them into columns, I can put them into values. You'll remember, I'm gonna go back here, you'll remember that we had names and years, and those were our two dimensions that we talked about before. And so one dimension could be my rows, would be names. Another dimension could be years, which would be my columns. And then the data that I'm using is the total sales. So let's just copy this format exactly. I'll go back to my pivot table. I will take my rep and put that into rows. I will take I'll scroll up here to take my year, put that into columns, and I will scroll back down to my total and put that into values. In this case, it's sum of values. Yep, so that looks to be, so that's 2019. Let's make sure if I go back to sheet 2 and say 2019, the parent had 3,000. So let's go back here and see, was parent on here at 3,000? Yes. So it's a little bit harder to read when these aren't dollar signs. So I'm gonna go ahead and highlight all of those and make them dollars. And then I'm gonna highlight all of my cells. I'm gonna double click here to make my columns the right size. So now I remember from before that parent had the highest in the first year and 0 in the second year. And I can see that that's true here. And then there's also what's nice is a grand total. So this was a much, much faster way to create this. This exact table was created in just a few seconds by using a pivot table. So let's say I also wanted to do something else. I could see how many units sold, so I can get rid of that. Or I can drag and drop units into values and then drag away. If I want to drag away an item, I just click and drag it back up. So I can include units here. And in this case, these are not dollars. These are a number of units. And so I'll change those to comma. I can see the number of units that each rep sold during each year. And that's kind of a cool way to look at it too. It's not necessarily, one rep could have sold, a large number of pencils, whereas another rep could have sold a smaller number of desks, but it could represent a larger dollar value or even a larger profit. It's not necessarily the same amount of profit for each item. So it could, looking at just the total number of units sold might not be as descriptive as you want it to be. So you just have to know your business and know your industry and know what is the most relevant data for you to have. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the units. I'm going to scroll back down and I'm going to put total back in. So we have the total sales for each person. So that's kind of nice. We can see that. What if we wanted to break this up by region? So I mentioned that we could do multiple dimensions. Well, I could click and drag region into one of these boxes. And depending on what I want to look at, it would decide which box I want to drag it into. If I want to see the total sales by region, I would move region into my rows column. I would do that. And since an individual sales rep is not assigned to multiple regions, I want to make sure I get the order done correctly. So I want to take region and I want to put it above the rep. I could put it below the rep if I wanted to, but I know that there is not a rep who is in two different regions. So I want to keep the highest level, the highest order of information at the top. And so region comes first and then rep goes below that. And so my central region includes these people, my east region includes these people, and my west region includes these people. And now I can see the total sales for the east region in 2019 was 5,193. The total sales for the central region in 2020 was 7,305. And then those were broken up into individual people and what they sold as well. So that's a very clear and easy way to break that information up. And it did not take very much for us to do. All we had to do was click and drag region and put it above rep in our rows column, in our rows box. So that's a very fast way to do it. I could move region over to year, and then, or let's actually flip the order of that. And so we have central in 2019 and 2020. We have east in 2019 and 2020, and west in 2019 and 2020. So we do have the same information, just in a different format. I think I prefer this way. I think this is most clear to me. Whatever is most clear to you, you are welcome to use. And if you can explain it to your supervisor more clearly, use the way that makes it, well, either use the way that's easier for you to explain it to your boss, or the way that your boss asks for it. That's really the way, whatever they want to see, you should show them. So I think that's pretty clear on pivot tables. We can do one other option here. If you click inside your pivot table, it will allow you these extra menu options called Analyze and Design. If you click outside of the pivot table, those do not exist. But if you click inside the pivot table, Analyze and Design do exist. And if we choose Analyze, we can do a little bit more analysis on our table. Let me go ahead and move my face again so I can see what's going on over here. I'll put it, it's not like a good place to put this. I'll put it down at the bottom, kind of here. This is a good out of the way spot. So I'm gonna go click design. So I can change the way that this table is. I can change the color scheme if I wanted to. I could change what things are formatted in which ways. I could do all that kind of stuff. I could also choose to include or exclude my grand totals or subtotals. Just like that. So those are options for that. Under Analyze, I can go to Pivot Chart, which I think is extremely useful. Click Pivot Chart, and it gives me some options. I'm gonna go ahead and click the first option, the default choice, which is called Clustered Column, and then I'm gonna hit OK. And now I have a chart that is the same information, but broken into a graph, which is oftentimes much easier to read. So I have the central area, which shows the years. So the blue column is 2019, the orangish reddish column is 2020, and it's for each person in central, each person in east, and each person in west. So that's a very clear way to see that east did very good in 2019, Jones and Parent especially, but it looks like central did much better in 2020, and Hardeen and Kivel, and Smith and Gill also did pretty well. But Hardeen and Kivel seem to have done the best in 2020. And Central has the most people, so they looks like have the largest number of sales as well. So we can do that. If I wanted to continue to edit this chart, I could actually get rid of rep here and just do Central, East, and West individually, or I can move rep over here. That's not a good way to, don't do it that way. That's not very clear. That's not a very clear way either. Go back here to region. What if I did it like this? No, that's not very good. So I think this way is the clearest way to see. But feel free to play around with it, because that's that's going to be a lot of your job as an analyst if you're doing any kind of data analysis. As an entry level, first time job out of college, you're going to want to play around with it to see what's the clearest way to show the information that you want to show. Start dropping these around, move them around, and see what works for you. So that is pivot tables, and that's going to be the pivot tables was its own section here. So we'll do a little more advanced stuff after this. I think we might have 1 or 2 more segments. So we'll go a couple more advanced Excel topics next, and I'll see you then.